Hey there, this is Erica from Ever Educating. Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, this channel is all about teaching tips, ideas, and resources for college instructors. Though today specifically, I'm talking about how I teach literary analysis with my students. So usually these are undergrads, but I'd say this could be helpful for maybe older high school students as well in an English course, in case that's who you are, right? If you're teaching high schoolers rather than college students. But I'm basically gonna go through my process, start to finish, on how I approach teaching literary analysis. So if that interests you, go ahead and keep on watching. So I've gone through different phases here on how I approach teaching analysis. And for example, I have a blog post where I go into detail on how I approach it, and that's from a couple years ago. But currently, this is what I'm doing in my current class, and that is starting with going and introducing students to different literary terms. Okay, so first, giving them a foundation of the language we'll be using in class. Okay, so no analysis yet, just, okay, what is metafiction? What is metaphor? Figurative language, point of view, right? And so getting into here are these terms that we should be using in our discussions and in our written analysis of the text we'll be reading and analyzing in class. Okay, so I really recommend not assuming knowledge on the part of your students. I've done this before and then realized at least a few students did not know what these terms meant, and so either they never used them or they ended up using them incorrectly, right? And so really give them resources, written resources, definitions of the terms, but also I really recommend having them practice applying it to examples, right? So you might say, okay, well, a simile is a comparison using like or as, and an example is cool as a cucumber, right? Now give me your own example, right? And so have that interaction with them. Or you might have, all right, pathetic fallacy is a popular term when I teach my courses. And so, okay, here is an example, right? You see a character and they're really sad, and so they walk outside the house and it's raining, right? And so they're walking all stooped and it's raining and the sun has a frown on its face, right? And so that's pathetic fallacy. Now find me another example of it in a text that we've read, right? Or in something you've read outside of class. So the use of examples is really key here, not just can you regurgitate the definition that I gave you before, because that's memorizing, not actually learning. Okay, so first, terminology. And then we move on into class concepts is what I call them. Okay, so talking about, we're going to be talking about race and ethnicity and gender, sexuality, religion, family dynamics. Okay, and so I say it's not just using these literary terms, but also analyzing how these portrayals of concepts are done in these texts and how you can analyze these concepts, right? And how they're seen and used in what we're reading for class. So terms first and then concepts. And so at this point is when I start using short text, right? So step 3 here is always start with a really short text before you have them reading any long novels or long nonfiction text. When I teach children's literature, I start with poetry, of course, but in this case, let's say you don't want to do poetry, you're only doing prose in your course, I recommend fairy tales. Okay, fairy tales often have, if they're the popular ones, right? A lot of students already are familiar with them, but usually they haven't actually read, let's say, the Grimm tale, right? The Grimm version of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, or the Andersen version of Little Mermaid. And so in that case, it's a short text, not too short. There's plenty of content to actually analyze, right? Which can't be always said with poetry, but it has information there that's not going to take them forever to read. And so I have, all right, we have the terms, we have the concepts, let's apply them to this fairy tale or these 2 or 3 fairy tales. And so in that case, they can read it for homework, but also it's not too hard to go over the whole thing in class as well, right? It's not too cumbersome to read the whole thing at the beginning if you find that to be necessary for your students. Okay, so at this point, basically what you do here is you prompt them to practice using the terms and the concepts together, right? Or the terms and the concepts separately and then combine them. And so like recently I had my video about different ways to structure your class sessions in a week. And so in this case, obviously you did the lecturing beforehand, I would assume, or maybe you have a short lecture of some terms on Tuesday and then give them an individual prompt of, all right, apply it to this fairy tale that you read for class, and then Thursday you have a whole class discussion of what they found, right? So that'd be one example of a structure for the week. The other ones can be found in that video below. But in any case, start with fairy tales, short stories, even picture books. and then move through to, novels or whatever it is that you want them to focus on for your class. I don't recommend starting with picture books versus, for example, fairy tales, because obviously picture books are not just the words, but also the images, the illustrations. And that's a whole level of visual literacy, multimodality, that can involve different terms, different types of literacy and tools needed, right? And so fairy tales, you can find ones that have no illustrations included in them, or maybe they just have a cover image, and so that one isn't as cumbersome. Though if you do have a class where you're going to be teaching graphic novels at the end, right, then of course I recommend using picture books as the short text to get them practicing connecting the images to the words and how they work together, right, the visual semiotics of the text. And so this is how I approach literary analysis, right? Terms, concepts, short text, and then the regular length text of the class, okay? So again, I do have that blog post linked below that has a different approach, slightly different approach that I can recommend as well. So if you want to learn about that, I'll link it. But if you found this helpful, do click like. If you have any questions about this approach, let me know in the comment section, and I'll see you next time with a new video.